I'd like to welcome everybody to a public meeting tonight regarding the all Lima Railroad grade separation here on the east side of Lima. If you haven't signed in, please do so before you leave the meeting tonight. We want to make sure if you ask any questions, we can get those questions written out and back to you. So we need your name and address and those kinds of things. I want to thank everybody for coming. It's a pleasant turnout. Glad to see everybody here. Plan to go through a presentation. We'll have a little bit of an open house here. We're going to continue that open house until 7. And we'll be available for questions thereafter. Just contact me at the city. Again, my name is Kirk Niemeyer. I'm the city engineer for Lima. I'd like to introduce a few other folks we have in attendance tonight. We have from our consultant, we have Chuck Underreiner. Just raise your hand. Any one of these people can answer questions. If you haven't asked your question, you think of a question during the presentation. We have Tony Lenhart at American Structure Point. Frank Aransky is the project manager for Structure Point. Over here we have Tracy Jones from OR Colon. If your property is impacted, commercial, residential property, impact questions. If you see something where you think your property may be impacted, Tracy is well versed in real estate questions. And Scott Recker, also with ODOT, he's a real estate person that helps us out all the time with our various projects. We also have Lori Brinkman. Lori's the LPA coordinator for ODOT District 1. She helps us get through these projects, keeps us on the right path. Kirk Slusher is the deputy director in ODOT District 1. Anybody else from ODOT that I missed? From the City of Lima, we have Howard Elstro. Public Works Director, we have Eric Bontrager, Assistant City Engineer, Joe Gearing, our Stormwater Manager, Mayor David Berger, Mike Lederer, our Engineering Inspector. So we hope to answer any and all of your questions tonight. If we can't answer them tonight, we'll certainly get an answer for you until you're satisfied. I think I covered all my preliminary housekeeping items. I'll go through the presentation here, and then at the end we'll open it up to answer any questions. I'll be happy to pass the microphone around so people can hear your question and walk to you. So we can, frankly, you're going to writing down questions. So we get the question, and if we can't answer it, we'll get you an answer. I don't know if we can. I do have a few printouts. Might help those that pass those around. Anybody has trouble seeing the screen, but the lighting, I think it's Lima Senior High. Person else around. Get the lighting turned on a little bit. This map just doesn't show up too we tried to keep the lights up so you can see the displays. By the way, the displays are both the same on both sides of the room, just doubled up, so we got plenty of room for everybody to see. There, it's a little better. Thank you. On this map here, this depicts the city of Lima urbanized area. On the right-hand side, that pink line is the I-know Railroad. The arrow is the project location. We're aware of the two hospitals that are on each side of that. Apologize if I'm blocking your view. On each side of the I-know Railroad, we've got the fire stations along the Main Street corridor, which are all on the west side of the Indiana-Ohio Railroad. Lima Police and Sheriff downtown, ambulatory locations, Lima Senior High. So those are the locations of the people we're trying to get to and from each side of the railroad. Safety service people as well as the students attending Lima Senior High and the other various elementary, middle school. Some of the major problems that when we initially set out with the project, closest grade separated crossing from this general location. And by location, our study area included North Street down to Kibbe Street. So we initially looked at 5 different locations, and that's generally the only place you can, without going outside the city or out of your way, in this case, to the north, can't get through Buckeye or Blue Lake Road, so you go up to US 30, that's 6 miles. If you go south to get over to Indiana, Ohio, you're going 2.5 miles to the I-75 project. And the I-know trains can be up to, during our data collection, 93 cars in length, so it's a sizable train that can block a number of the crossings in the city. The total vehicles a day that use North Street, High Street, Elm Street, Bell Fountain, and Kibbe Street is 35,000, roughly 35,000 vehicles a day. So those are vehicles, motorists, citizens of Lima that are impacted every day when there's a crossing delay. As well, we have the, from the previous slide, we have the delay of emergency vehicles, police, fire, and ambulance. We've all heard stories of, this is more to do with students, but I think there's also a case from the former health director, health commissioner, talking about a doctor trying to crawl underneath a train or go through the trains, as well as there's been accounts of kids trying to cross under the train or go through between the cars when it's trains are at a slower pace. Also, we have the delay of emergency personnel, physicians and nurses, both doctors and nurses, all the different medical personnel working at both hospitals that do time at both hospitals that need to get back and forth to help people for medical help. We also have the delay of commerce. Whenever crossing is blocked, we have businesses waiting for deliveries. We have cartage and freight sitting there idle, as well as air quality issues with sitting still and running. Safety conflicts. We have pedestrian bicycles and vehicles. Anytime you have at-grade crossings, you have those risks, especially if there's a school in the close proximity, which there is. We also have the high crash intersection, which is the 5-point intersection of Bell Fountain, Calumet. Crash intersection is ranks, I don't know exactly what number, but it's in the top for Allen County. I did forget one person. We have Mr. Tom Mazer, who's with the Allen County Regional Planning Commission with us as well. Give you a little bit of the project history. Project goes back almost 13 years, I'm sure even farther, but the city's been pursuing this project for a very long time. In March 2000, I believe this feasibility study was actually prepared by the city, if I remember correctly. And then October 2000, took that study and applied for funding through the Road Grade Separation Program. That was a program through ODOT. And the city was unsuccessful at that time. 2002, we then looked at pursuing rail relocation funding, and unsuccessful with that as well. 2005, we met with the CSX, NS, and the INO and tried to talk the INO into combining with the CSX line, which is to the west of us. And if anybody's familiar with railroads do not want to share much of anything, let alone trackage rights. In 2007, it was through State Representative Michael Oxley. The city was awarded a funding, $2.3 million through Safety Lou, which was a transportation fund that particular year. And with that funding, we started preliminary engineering, preliminary studies, and have carried that forward up until this point with our consultant, American Construction Board. After beginning the initial studies, we sat down in November of 2008, a stakeholder meeting to develop the goals and objectives, and that's basically to the beginning point of the purpose and need of the project. The purpose and need is, in this case for this project, is a pretty thick document, and we can share that. I think it's actually part of the purpose and need is included in your handout. But we lay out all the needs of the project, what we want to achieve, as well as the purpose. Shortly after that, we had our first public meeting where we presented all the 10 alternatives of the project. And we have 5 roadways here. We have North, High, Elm, Bellefontaine, and Kitty. Plus we had a no-build alternative as well. And so each one of those we looked at an underpass, an overpass. And we also collected information, which I do have the public involvement, part of the public involvement document from that meeting, which, like tonight, everybody was given the opportunity to voice their concerns and questions. From there, we proceeded to develop the project and continue to narrow it down. And I'll get into a little bit more of the narrowing down process after I finish this slide. But continue to narrow it down to the 2 alternatives which you see on the displays tonight, which are the Elm Street over and underpass. Then again in 2010, we presented the project to the TRAC. TRAC stands for Transportation Review Advisory Council.
How would it work?
That's a group that looks at projects throughout the state of Ohio that are over $12 million in costs. So your large projects you present, and however we were not selected for that particular round of TRAC. TRAC became overcommitted shortly thereafter with a number of projects that they had identified throughout the state. but since the changes, the new revenue from Ohio Turnpike, that has made more funds available for track projects. So sort of been a revitalization of the track process and getting projects through track. So actually this week we go up to Toledo to meet before that committee again, present the project, and hopefully secure additional funding for the project. Tonight we have public meeting number 2, which again we're presenting the preferred alternative for comment. I know this is a small matrix, but this on the left-hand column, I know you can't read it. The left-hand column are the goals that we initially developed for the project. Across the rows are the various 10 alternatives, both under and over for each location. And so we weighed those, scored them, weighed them throughout the review process to try to find the best alternative. With that initial matrix, we narrowed the project down to the alternative 3, which is the Bellefontaine Avenue, both under and over. And on this particular slide, you see the red properties in red would be those that would be impacted by the project, creating an overpass or underpass on Bellefontaine Avenue. And the next slide is the Elm Street. The initial matrix we narrowed down to 2, which were Bellefontaine and Elm Street, both over and under on both of those streets. Again, properties in red are those that are affected by the either an over or underpass. Testing. Both Bellefontaine and Elm Street were carried forward. Next phase of the project, and again, all the different purpose and need items, goals of the project, if you will. The project was weighed against those, and one of the early needs of the project for the city was to come up with a solution that minimized the right-of-way impacts and also reduced the overall right-of-way costs. The city, obviously, with any public improvement project, right-of-way, there's right-of-way impacts, and we want to reduce those as best we can, but still satisfy the purpose and need of the project. During the look at both Bellefontaine and Elm Street, the right-of-way costs were in the neighborhood of $1.7 to $2.5 million more for a Bellefontaine Avenue underpass or overpass, which, along with other items, led us to truly consider the Elm Street as the preferred alternative of the project. There were some issues that we had with Elm Street. One was, how do we drain the project, especially if it's a underpass. We also had concerns with groundwater because we had an environmental report or a geotechnical report from which is now the Chinese restaurant, which used to be I believe a BP, or no, I'm sorry, I think a United Dairy Farmers BP. Because they once had underground tanks and they had an extensive geotechnical study which showed groundwater close to the surface. So we did our own investigation more closely next to the I&O Railroad to see if groundwater was a concern. We also looked at if we do construct an underpass, will we be able to gravity drain down to the Ottawa River as opposed to creating a pump station, which over the long term is more maintenance and more cost to the city and the taxpayers. Both the groundwater problem and the drainage worked out for the project. In addition to I'll step back to the matrix, the underpass is slightly lower in cost, and we feel it's always been a concern of the city, especially since the construction of the Jameson overpass, that we construct public infrastructure with the neighborhoods in mind. And we feel that a project like the Vine Street project, which is also an underpass, there's less division, it's more pedestrian friendly, more bicycle friendly, especially down at Vine Street with the elementary school so close by. There's less disruption of the neighborhood, and we feel that it end up with a more cohesive neighborhood, just as it was before we got there. So that's an important aspect to the city, as well as, again, minimizing cost, as well as satisfying the purpose and need of the project. There is more railroad involvement with an underpass type project, because you do have to construct additional rail called a shoe fly to get the trains around the project while you're constructing. What you see on the displays and up on the screen tonight is what we feel is the preferred alternative for the project that best satisfies the purpose and need of the project. And components of that are a underpass on Elm Street with improvements to both Shawnee, some improvements on Bell Fountain, majority of the improvements on Elm Street, a roundabout at the intersection of Calumet, Bell Fountain, Elm, and Bell Fountain. I named them all. The reason that the roadway on Elm Street, the proposed roadway, is curved is so we have a minimum slope that we want to achieve, and in the northern climates, 5%, which 5% would be the slope you would find on North Street underpass. It's also an acceptable slope. I mean, you can get into much steeper slopes, but for sight lines and for snow and ice control and motorists being able to navigate safely in a winter situation, 5% or less is a preferred slope. So the roadway does curve, and we have to actually lengthen the roadway to achieve those slopes. That curve in the roadway also brings us in. Brings us into the roundabout at the correct location, more like a standard four-leg intersection where all your intersecting streets are at 90 degrees rather than a skewed intersection. So the roundabout is being proposed because this is a high crash intersection. This is a single lane roundabout. Roundabouts have many advantages, and you see them popping up across the state, and we feel we've actually prepared a roundabout or safety study for this roundabout, and hope to, if we're successful, offset some of the costs of the overall project with some safety funds from ODOT. There are some improvements along Shawnee Street, which is by Memorial. There will be basically a 3-lane section throughout these sections of roadway. Therefore, if there is stop traffic on the roadway, similar to if you've been through Vine Street, we still have, our traffic is congested for whatever reason. If you have, Lima Senior High football game is letting out and there's an ambulance run or a fire run or a police run, we still have that center 3rd lane to get that traffic through. So there should be adequate space for achieving what we want to do here, is get safety services from one side of the tracks to the other. This is, of course, similar to what you saw on each side of the room. Just a 3D rendering. One thing to point out, we still provide right in, right out on Calumet Avenue. So, in a sense, you still have a 5-lane intersection. We also provide better access to Lima Stadium. The access drive ties in to the north and to the east of the roundabout. But we do this in a much safer manner and in a much more efficient manner. Roundabouts, not only are they advantageous for safety, but also for traffic flow. They're very successful. Project costs, overall project cost at this point in time is $19.74 million. Looking forward, or looking back a little bit and looking forward, the safety lieu is the $2.36 million that we were awarded in 2007 that we continue to use, and we have enough funding to take us through both the environmental and the detailed design. As far as local revenue, this is project or funds, both stormwater, sanitary costs involved in this project are both about $900,000 each. We also have a commitment through the MPO, Lima County Regional Planning Commission, for $3 million in 2018. We also have a private commitment from both Lima Memorial and St. Rita's of $50,000 each. And this will go a long way. What they call in the transportation world these days, public-private partnerships. And whenever ODOT sees that private companies are coming forward and helping fund a project, it weighs heavily in their decision-making process. So we thank both hospitals. They see the need, and we appreciate their cooperation. The track request this week, we are asking for $3 million for right-of-way and utility costs for the project. This will help us continue to carry the project forward. The way the system process is set up is, unless we have funding for a subsequent phase of the project, in this case, our next step would be detailed design. After that would be right-of-way acquisition. If we don't have right-of-way acquisition funds secured, we can't proceed with environmental or the detailed design. So kind of linchpin in this process is securing those right-of-way funds. Future track request, I believe the track meets twice a year, accepts applications twice a year, could be once a year, is it twice? Twice. We plan to apply for construction funding, which would be in the neighborhood of $9.5 million. Again, we could, if we're successful, offset some of that $9.5 million with safety funds and also transportation alternative funds, which would be for any aesthetics associated with the project. Future milestones, what we plan to achieve, environmental and detailed design. We hope to continue on with the process. Again, we have funds for that work in 2014. That will lead into right-of-way utilities in 2015. Typically, we like to give a year and a half for right-of-way acquisition, and then we would have construction in 2018. With that, I hope to cover the basis. With that, I'll open it up to questions. And again, there is a question comment sheet attached to your handout that was over here at the desk. You can turn that in tonight. You can think about it. Fax it to me, email it to me. I believe my contact information is on there. So we want to get whatever input we can and hopefully continue the process. Chuck, do you have anything to add before I open it up to questions and answer? Frank?
I just wanted to mention but Kirk said we did study the groundwater in the pump station on the underpass. And what we found is the groundwater doesn't appear to be a problem. We're able to gravity flow that underpass to the river. So those two things will reduce the cost, and most likely we're not going to need the pump station.
Any questions?
Sir, my name is Wayne Cook. Thank you for letting me ask a question.
Let me bring you the microphone.
Do I need that? I got a pretty good voice on me, so I'm not
Whichever you prefer.
Well, anyway, my question is this. I represent and help represent TAN, who is the owner of the East Wind. And I noticed some nice drawings over here, but where our business is setting, we're concerned about traffic flow. Even though with the roundabout, we feel at this present time with the driveway access we do have, given the traffic that's going to be filtering down Bell Fountain Avenue, our customers are not going to be able to get in and out of our business all that easy. We're very concerned about that. Then number two about that, on Elm Street then, going in from the west side of the street there, we have a driveway there, and we notice on these drawings that driveway is going to be non-existent. 40% of our business enters and leaves through that entrance. So we're kind of wondering how we're going to be able to compensate for the roundabout the way it's in the drawing right now. And we're going to have to watch that pretty closely. Right now, the way they have that set up, we may have to move the business because of that very situation. And that's a very big concern of ours. So I don't know how I can go about making it any easier, but if we have to move that business, where are we going to move it and keep our customers the way they are now? That's the other thing we have to look at there. So we are concerned about the constant flow down Bell Fountain Avenue at that driveway.
Okay. You said the East-West restaurant?
East Wind.
East Wind.
Yeah, the owner is TAN.
The majority of the question surrounds mainly real estate right-of-way
Well, how
question.
we're going to get our customers in and out.
Correct. And in that case, during the right-of-way process,
Yes, sir.
your entrances and exits to the existing public right-of-way versus what they would be in the after would be evaluated.
Thank you, sir.
And if there are impacts based on a pre-qualified ODOT appraiser and review appraiser, then typically, property owner is compensated for any negative impacts. And Tracy, I don't know if you were here earlier when I introduced Tracy Jones. She's with OR Colon. They're pre-qualified ODOT real estate specialists, so they deal with these issues all over the state, so they can provide you with possibly some examples. And again, it's one of those things that we can look at during the detailed design process to try to make it as least disruptive and at least, as good, if we can, as good in the before as it was in the after, if hopefully not better.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
I'm asking questions on behalf of the Allen County Historical Society. I'm interested in the locomotive location, and I was wondering if the plans are far enough, or the preliminary engineering, is it far enough along where you have a preferred location for your shoe fly? Because I'm familiar enough with the Vine Street project to know how much acquisition we needed on that particular project. And I'm concerned that there's not enough room to do the shoe fly without affecting either the locomotive or the Palmer Donovan building. I don't want to see the locomotive get moved, in other words.
We've only done a very preliminary look at the runaround, and I'm not really prepared, I guess, yet today until we get into detailed design.
Well, I could see a lot more right-of-way being acquired than what is shown on the maps right now.
I'm sorry.
I could see the need for a lot more right-of-way to be acquired than what is shown on the maps. And whether that goes clear down to Bell Fountain or not, I don't know.
And I understand, and please understand that these are very preliminary plans.
I had a feeling that it just wasn't far enough along to know which way the shoe fly would go. So that was a big deal when we did Vine Street. It took a lot of room to move that track.
Our intent was first to zero in on the preferred alternative, then get into more detailed design and detail looking at which side
I just thought it was worth asking because I'm concerned about the locomotive.
I just need a little more time until we get into
Understood.
detail. I'm sorry.
Understood.
Would you like to?
Yes, I'm Teresa Adams, 5th Ward Councilor for the city. One thing that I see absent from the pictures tonight is the intersection of Shawnee and Bell Fountain. I do have a concern on how the traffic is going to make that transition to take advantage of this under overpass if it comes to be. So I would like to see in the next set of drawings or whatever, that area developed and what properties affected at that intersection. You had mentioned in your presentation, Kirk, that it's like $19-some million. And the first alternative would have been Bell Fountain, and that was like $1 to $2 million.
That was just right away.
Exactly. In addition to possible.
1.5 to 2.5. That 19.74 was.
My other concern I heard from the public tonight and walking around overhearing comments is having lived in the area since '85, it's been the wish of the residents and to be on Bell Fountain, that the under overpass should be there. And going forward, the concern is with the truck traffic, making this transition even through this design and the semis. So I hope that's looked at in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. The question on the plan view at least, of the intersection of Bell Fountain and Shawnee Street. We originally, that was included with the project, and not to say it can't be included in the future. But through the track process, which is our best option to get funding for this project, we were asked to see if there's any way we could either do parts with another process, with another type of funding, or try to reduce our overall cost of the project so we could, in a sense, be more successful in obtaining funding. Your concerns are valid. We want to provide a route that's going to meet the needs of a 53-foot tractor trailer, and for the most part, this what we've laid out here does. So we will take a closer look at the intersection of Shawnee and Bell Fountain. Originally, how we had that laid out, there's certain requirements as far as how much skew you can have at an intersection. We had it laid out to provide the proper angle at the intersection, which did have additional right-of-way impacts, specifically for the parking for Memorial Hospital. It actually jogged Shawnee Street through their main parking area, main entrance of the hospital, as well as the Medilab, I believe it is, on the other corner. So there were both right-of-way impacts, but when we looked at again, back to the purpose and need, the feeling was that we could still, it was a correct angle to bring trucks up Shawnee through the underpass and carry on, or vice versa out. It wasn't necessarily meeting the ODOT standard as far as a skewed intersection, but we'll take another look at that. Your second question was, what was the second part of your question?
Without the improvement at Shawnee and Bell Fountain, there's going to be an underpass that goes nowhere. Get that traffic off of Bell Fountain, not just the trucks, semis, but traffic at that line. And that's going to be possibly funded under this.
Well, we can take the comment that we received tonight, and that's justification for saying, hey, we tried to trim things down. It wasn't a good idea. Let's take a closer look and put it back. So, other questions?
I don't need to okay. I was just wondering if there were any thoughts given to Shawnee Street between North Street or Reservoir Road and down to Elm Street, because once that underpass is developed, trucks from Procter & Gamble, once they're stopped there, will make that turn down Shawnee, which is like a alley.
Well, how the alignment is set up currently, the only bypass, if you will, for the grade at Bell Fountain would be Shawnee up to Elm Street and back to 309-117. Shawnee Street north of Elm Street, this location, one, it's parkland. Two, it gets heavy residential. Well, it's majority residential, which trucks over, according to city ordinances, trucks over 10 ton aren't allowed on residential streets. So we also have residential properties that would be, there's no front yard, basically, the way Shawnee Street is constructed today. So all those properties would be impacted. So we would not have any intention Initially, when we looked at North Street underpass, we looked at making that improvement, but it's disruption to that residential neighborhood that, we have Reservoir Road that connects into both State Route 81, 309, 117 in the downtown. So I understand, there's also connections out at I-75 project, both at 81 for the Procter & Gamble trucks and at 309, 117. I'm not going to say there's not going to be a couple trucks that come over the new Reservoir Road Bridge and want to try to turn on a residential street. It potentially could happen, but it's not one of the recommended improvements at this time to anything on Shawnee Street. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Why is Bell Fountain underpass so much more expensive than what is on East North Street right now? It looks like this is a Cadillac compared to what East North Street is underpass.
Well, you're talking about the existing North Street underpass or the CSX and NS. The East-North underpass, I believe, was constructed in the mid-90s, correct? That was mid-80s?
Yeah.
And at that time, there was certainly a lot of consideration paid to the existing buildings that were there, Fidelity, and the other structures. And it ended up being vertical wall, tie-back walls. We try to look at things a little bit different. We try to make these improvements more fitting to the neighborhood, to blend into the neighborhood a little bit more. Yeah, we could construct this thing without any aesthetics whatsoever, but we don't feel that that's the best option for Lima or the motoring public. We want something, this is a corridor into the city of Lima, whether you come in Bell Fountain or use the proposed Elm Street underpass. We want it to be attractive. We want people to remember it. We also want it to function, meeting not only today's traffic, but future traffic needs.
The only time we use this when there's a train. The only time. Unless you radically alter Shawnee, there's no semi in the world that would make that curve either onto Shawnee or, granted, these are preliminary, but I know what preliminary tends to be. The turn from Shawnee on Elm, the radius is way too short for a semi. All you gotta do is check Roush Road and 81, Wall Street and 309. The trucks tear those corners up all the time because they simply can't make the turn. The roundabout, a single lane roundabout for a semi, they will find another way around Lima. There's some trucking companies in town. Ask them. Their drivers will go any place else rather than that. That is way too tight for a semi.
Well, if the semi has local deliveries inside the city of Lima, we want it to function for those trucks. If this is through traffic, that their only purpose is to get from one side of Lima to the other and clog up
State
Lima.
Route 309. It's a state route.
Right, and through another study, which we worked on in the downtown to look at all the state routes through Lima, final phase of that project is to reroute both truck traffic for State Route 65 and 309 to I-75 up to State Route 81, Sugar Street, and Robb Avenue. That was the recommendation out of that study, and that was the public input. Because, yeah, if they're doing business in Lima, we want them to be able to get to where they need to go and not build or construct anything that's a hindrance. But if they want to, all they're doing is passing through, we would much prefer that they use an outer belt or another means than come through the city.
Just an awful lot of money spent. It's only going to be used when there's
And going back to the purpose and need,
I'll go Kim Street. I will walk on fire rather than go through that roundabout. I'll go Kim Street and find another one.
you'll still have, we'll still have all the at-grade crossing opportunities. Any other questions? If not, we're here till 7 o'clock, which is about another 40 minutes, or we can stay as long as the questions keep coming. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming.